the earlier role-playing games to Star Frontiers, Werewolf the Apocalypse, to Iron Claw, which is specifically made by furries for furries, to Golden Sky Stories, which is a Japanese role-playing game that's just recently undergone a Kickstarter. It's about henge, Japanese magical animals and their interactions with people in a small Japanese village. So it's not a violent game, unlike most role-playing games that definitely show their wargaming roots. Golden Sky Stories is more a slice of life, how people get along with other people. Moving on, furries in computer games. We've got Sonic and Tails. We've got Ratchet and Clank, Conquer, and all those glorious games. Bloody Roar, Star Control series with the show Fixty. Trust me, you always want to start with the self-destruct ready to go. MMOs. World of Warcraft. From before it was an MMO, they had pandas, they had the Tauren. They added Worgen, which are basically werewolves. EverQuest has several different races, including the Ratanga. Star Trek Online, straight out of the animated series, has the Acadians. And by a very roundabout way, they've got another furry race for the Klingon side, the Pharisans. Larry Niven wrote some of the stories for the animated series, brought the Kazin in, then legal disputes happened, as they tend to. So they became the Lyrans at one point, and then legal disputes happened. And now they're the Pharisans. So that's a very quick going through various gaming. Demographics. Furry's got, shall we say, a slightly unusual skew for its demographics, possibly related to the origin from Mark Merlino and Conference, possibly due to the fact that we role-play animals with human traits or vice versa, so we're already thinking differently when it comes to relations. Different polls have different results, but they all tend to show that it's not the standard skew. Of extreme interest is the number of transgendered furries. As you might be able to guess, transgender here. I go with female. I was born male. So furry helped me with understanding that aspect of myself. I knew that my body didn't fit. I didn't know how. Figured it out eventually. And the last slide that I have prepared, some shared imagery. I mean, bulldogs, the bear. I've seen paw prints used for both for gay people in general and for LGBT furries and for just furries. They just leave off the rainbow. Drag queens and their very common use of bitch. It does seem more of an affectionate term. Among furries, you'll find some that use bitch in the affectionate. So, and again. And as a rule, fursuiters don't talk in suit. It would break the magic. And there's Most of them don't have very articulated mouths. Some do. But you'll notice that they tend to do much better body language, which, again, in common with drag queens, drag queens do tend to have a lot of body language. But fursuiters aren't by necessity drag queens.
There's a Venn diagram there.
There are some that do crossplay, which is different from drag. As a cosplayer as well, crossplay is an interesting topic. Depending on the group, there's a lot of interest in making a female version of a character or a male version. I've got a friend who crossplays as various versions of the Doctor. She's definitely not trying for a male look. So she does Femme 11. So, are there any questions, comments? Yes.
Sure. So as someone, so I'm fairly queer cultured, I feel very comfortable there. What would be your recommendation to find information if you're looking to branch out and make connections within the furry community? Because obviously I want to do it in a respectful way, and I want to respect the space, and I don't want to, like you said, the not talking in fursuit was something I didn't know about. How to respect that safe space that they've created?
Well, for one, asking them questions is always good. The worst thing that can happen if you ask questions of people in fursuit is, so, how long have you been a fursuiter? That's the worst. Not many, okay. So 6.
5.
5? Oh, 5. Did you make your suit yourself?
Wow.
So that's the worst that would happen is you get some kind of pantomime. If you ask a question of someone in a fursuit, if you ask someone, what does yiff mean? You might get a table flip. Or you might get a, okay, here's the story. Yeah.
The question I have is, everything I've ever heard about furries up till now has always been like perverted furry sex conferences where it's like, people dress up in suits and do it. And the thing is the way you're explaining it now is a lot more, holistic and all-encompassing, where it has more to do with identity. And I guess what I'm wondering is, what crossover do you think it shares with, say, either transgender identity or with transhuman identity that thinks that like technology can make us more, I guess, complete or more, a wide-reaching experience?
Okay, so I think that there's a large number, obviously, from the demographics. There's a much larger incidence of people who identify as transgender in furry. I know for a fact that there is a very large transhumanist and otherkin. Is everyone familiar with the concept of otherkin? Think of it as trans-species. So there's a number of people in furry that do identify as trans-species, otherkin, from the people who identify as lycanthropes, which has a long history of its own that I do not have the qualifications to go into. They found themselves on the net on alt horror werewolf and brought their shared experiences from there. One of my girlfriends is otherkin. She identifies as a snowshoe hare. Another of my girlfriends is definitely transsexual, but not otherkin. So there's a lot of people who, because furry's got this interesting mix of identities to it, people bring their own identity into it, feel safer to express their identity until media gets involved. We don't have a long and storied positive history with media. Vanity Fair, Sex 2K,
CSI.
I was blanking on.
Yes, that one.
Real quick.
That's
That's what we call ruining the magic. If you don't mind, I'm gonna jump in.
Feel free.
Chat around, whatever. But
Feel free.
anyways,
Go on.
Might want to go to attic well, but for
So I appreciate it as a courtesy not to have the pictures in partial suit posted. That's one of the courtesies that we count on, especially
they are
at conventions.
recorded.
Understood.
They are recording right now.
Yeah,
Okay.
it is what it is. Speaking specifically to the question of identity, one of the ways that I like to explain the furry fandom is that we don't even care what species you present as, and then beyond that, it's entirely something where you can define your own identity. You can define a handful of them, any gender, any class, any number of limbs.
Yeah.
It's very open and very accepting for however you choose to present yourself.
For instance, I have a hot pink female sparkle dog. Yes, I have padding, and yes, it's a whole lot of fun to play the opposite gender at some points. It's a lot of fun.
So especially in terms of this being, gamers and furries natural allies, can you speak to some of the dangers that we've seen before with stuff like the burn fur movement and overreaction to negative stereotyping or negative media content, and how we can try to build within communities to better support that view or what the outside can see of the community?
Sure. So the burn fur movement, there were people that joined furry and felt that it was going too far into identity politics, or that it was being that people were bringing too many things that they considered not furry to it, like interests in the leather community or their sexuality, and they had an extreme reaction. They still identified as furs because they saw themselves as a fan of the art, but they saw everything else as diluting the fandom. So this is actually kind of, be aware that people approach furry very differently. So you've got the people who, it's the art, it's only the art, don't talk to me about anything else. And there's the people like me that go, yeah, I like the arts, I've got a persona, furry's sort of an identity for me, but not exactly. I don't consider myself a lifestyle. So remember that every furry is individual. Approach it that way. It usually helps to say, I've heard about these things, but where do you interact with furry? Ask them. Most furries are very willing to tell you what their experience with furry is.
How furry are you is never a bad question to ask.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the scene spiritualist/lifestylers really aren't particularly care about that much about the art, because it's really more of an internal thing to them and their own identity. So,
Yeah,
be furry without even
exactly.
furry art, particularly.
Though I've noticed that there is a tendency for an overlap there.
Oh yeah.
It's not a guaranteed overlap. Yes?
So to follow up on that, the gaming community is sort of famously caustic. Especially there's been a lot in the media lately, and there's attempts in technology with the Xbox One and their new rating systems and stuff like that to try to stem that. I've noticed that the furry community has a vastly different approach to community, and that sort of caustic nature tends to get ostracized rather than supported for the most part. And this, I can try to open it up to the room a bit. I think, how do you think it's possible that we can try to combine sort of the best parts of those communities into one, bringing in that acceptance that comes from the identity fluidity of furry, and combining it with, you play a lot of different characters, you are a lot of different people when you game, and creating that same sort of willingness to accept what isn't always presented to the gaming community?
Well, I mean, to be honest, the reason that furries have this trait is cultural. It comes from years of this is how the community just worked. It is part of what drew me into it. And part of why I have spent a lot more time in the furry community than in the gamer community. And I don't know, I suspect that one of the best ways that you could see that sort of attribute spread is just by osmosis. Having an event like this where there's a bunch of furries in an event that isn't necessarily furry can help, because sort of to an extent you can observe the way that we're operating. If people who don't identify as furries want to see how a community runs that doesn't sort of encourage the sort of trash talking and caustic behavior that gamers often do, well, there's a reason that the flyers at the FC table say that you don't have to be furry to show up. Show up, wander around, look at how people interact, see whether there's anything you can learn from it. Have fun.
One of the best things that we've noticed, and we're both on staff at Further Confusion, which is the furry convention in San Jose. One of the fantastic experiences that we get to see are the hotel staff who just work at the hotel, who take care of course, take care of the rooms, and then also come back on the weekends with their kids just to engage with the characters and enjoy that atmosphere. And so I think one of the most fantastic parts of the fandom is that at least in public, there's a very playful and youthful vibe to all sorts of participation. And when 90% of the people choose to participate in that way, then the 10% that come in and join say, well, okay. And I think that's a very positive aspect of the community.
So to speak to that, Further Confusion has run at the same time as a volleyball tournament for the past 3 years now?
Yes, and it's going to be for the next few as well.
Yeah. So usually it starts and there's not much engagement between the two sides. You get the few people that roll their eyes and, oh God, the furries. By the end, you see a lot of the volleyball players are sporting ears between events. They've got tails. Some of the parents even have stopped by.
I've been swarmed with photo requests numerous times.
They love the suitors. Utterly.
Even just walking out on the Nihonmachi street fair that's been going on at the same time, it's very easy to be swamped with.
Even with just the ears.
Of course. It brings to mind at BLFC, the bunny convention.
Oh.
So another example of this, to name two other conventions, there's one in Reno, Nevada called Biggest Little Fur Con, and it was their very first year this year. And they, because it's a very large hotel, it was cross-booked with, of all things, a rabbit breeders convention.
I think that there were more adult topics in the rabbit breeder conversation than the furry convention.
But it was really great because even though the convention space for the furry convention was blocked off, we had some members of the furry convention security walking very, very interested and possibly slightly inebriated rabbit breeders over to the dealer's room where they could purchase their own tails and ears and t-shirts and things like that.
We had several furries go over to the rabbit breeders like section, and they actually bought rabbits. That's impressive.
Get out of there, please. But that's one, and then the other one is that Anthrocon is the world's largest furry convention.
By far.
They just had their parade with 1,300 costumers, all in one line, in a record that is, I think, currently being validated by Guinness.
Yes.
And so that's a annual takeover, more or less, of downtown city of Pittsburgh, and the local businesses and attendees just really love coming over and engaging.
The locals in general, I've talked to a lot of people who say they come back every year just to see the furries and hang out and drink with us. So it's gotten like into a big city thing now, and I think San Jose's, for further confusion, is starting to see that a little bit too.
Yeah, I've noticed that. The local businesses for San Jose have been engaging with the furries in a positive way. Several of them have Further Confusion specials. And this year's Further Confusion has a gaming theme.
Yes.
So there's another point where we intersect.
Further Confusion versus the world. Scott Pilgrim. Yay.
One of the things you'll also know, and I don't know if you all got a chance to walk around the vendor room upstairs, the expo hall, and see the big banners that say Further Confusion on them. That's actually not an artifact of the booth itself. Those are banners that are placed on the street poles in downtown San Jose for the month preceding the convention and throughout the convention. So it's definitely something that we've really worked with the city and have had a lot of fun with that.
Extending a little bit beyond Further Confusion, but also applies to Further Confusion, are all of the furry cons that happen have gaming rooms, and tabletop gaming, electronic gaming, all kinds of gaming. A lot of the cons run these rooms 24/7, so you can game late in the night with friends. This year for Scott Pilgrim theme, we're trying to get a couple arcade units in, so yeah, come check it out and expect lots of gaming.
Curious, how do you tabletop gaming for him?
So one popular misconception about furry is that having a costume is expected or required. One of the things that you'll notice at Further Confusion, for instance, is that the parade in which we encourage everyone who has a costume to perform the costume has about 500, 600 people, and the entire
The rest of the con comes to show.
3,000.
We have a total of 3,300 or so people, and so 1 out of 5 or 6 people even has a costume at all. Most people are just there to meet up with friends who they have connections with all across the nation, and go out and drink and party and go to panels. We have panels about how to do flash animation, color theory for illustrators, writing and character development, and improv acting, stage acting. It's all sorts of things, and they don't. And while furry and being an animal in some sense is a common theme through them, not every panel has to do with that. Often it's just what people know about that they want to share with the community of their friends and their friends' friends.
Although I will admit that watching a fursuiter with very big, immobile paws try to tabletop game is sometimes quite humorous.
I will say that there's a good showing in the DDR tournament.
There is a fursuit DDR tournament at Further Confusion. At least there has been in the past. Not sure about this year.
And if you see my condition standing here, you'll have a special appreciation for people who do DDR in costume.
I've tried it. It sucks.
How much water weight do you lose?
You don't want to know.
Enough said. So, yeah.
Is winter your favorite season?
It certainly opens up more options. I'll say that.
Yeah, we enjoy cons that are during winter and cold climates.
Granted, in California, you get what you get. One thing that I'll say that I very much appreciate is trying to figure out good opportunities to go over and entertain crowds, and also put on a costume and goof off, which is probably 90% of it, just goofing off. In open events in the public, and so for the last 4 years I've donned one suit or another in beta breakers and done that, for instance. And so you'll often see So you'll often see, a stray fursuiter somewhere or another. But the other thing for you to keep in mind is that for every one you see, there are, another 5 or 10 who don't happen to be in costume, but happen to go to Further Confusion, go to other furry cons, enjoy the artwork, enjoy the writing, enjoy the games, and do their own thing.
Yes?
So, and this is without sarcasm, but if you're not talking, then in a fursuit, you're doing like a form of miming, right?
I think that's safe to say.
So, like, where's the balance on like what you're doing to be a performance for others versus just for your own fun?
That's a very interesting question. So one of the things that some fursuiters, especially those who are just getting into the community, they say, okay, this is me. This is a representation of myself with my inhibitions down. This is just how I choose to be in costume. And this is something that only some costumers then opt into. They say, okay, now this is no longer me. This is Tolver the Snow Leopard. How would he act in this situation? How does he choose to interact with the public? And so in some sense, it's kind of a merging of how you want to be and also what the situation is around you. But that's also something that some people say, oh, forget it, I just want to put on a dog head and party. And that's
just fine too.
I think everyone has a different view on how they want to portray their character. I mean, some people do talk in suit. Some people develop a specific voice and kind of character to go along with their suit, and that can be a lot of fun. Some people won't. Some people, you'll have an angry suit, and you'll run around and push people, and you suck.
Then there's Donkey.
It is and you also get varying opinions about how appropriate it is to be in a public place and to only be in partial costume, to remove the head, to do that. One of the things that some people enjoy a lot about the conventions is a standard of, I'm going to interact with this fox, and this is a fox. This is not a person in a costume. And so if you're interacting with furries, one of the favorite things that you can do is say, oh, you happen to be a snow leopard, oh, you happen to be a dog, and to take that as a given. By contrast, if you go to a furry that's not wearing any particular article of clothing and say, is it hot in there, then you're starting out the conversation by saying, I'm going to choose not to go with this bit of imagination, creativity that you happen to be going with, and that's kind of a downfall.
It's a bit of a bummer.
But and it's just like any other person who chooses to put on a costume. They often want to be taken as that character, and so it's often a lot of fun to play along. I typically would not be the one talking in costume or without a head, but I'm glad to tell you guys all about our community.
And I appreciate it, given that it's just me.
Another thing I've noticed is you can get away with a lot more in one of these than you normally could. If you walk into a bar and steal someone's beer, you'll probably get decked in the face. If you're wearing a fursuit, you walk into a bar and steal someone's beer, they'll think it's really cute, and then you might get decked in the face.
And there are a couple of furries where their persona does have a lot of that donkey.
He does, but I mean, I've seen.
Donkey does tend to push envelopes.
I've seen mean characters, I've seen slutty characters, I've seen cute characters. It's just all over the place.
Yep.
Depends on how you portray, how you act.
Go ahead.
So since you try and stay in costume as much as possible, just a practical question: how do you stay hydrated? Because you lose
with great difficulty. So one of the things at Further Confusion is that there are actually this year multiple rooms that are kind of secluded from the public, where costumers have elaborate head trees with blower fans, and they go over to stick the head over and have drinks, have often some form of Gatorade to replenish electrolytes.
Big fans.
That naturally that's a lot more difficult when you're doing so in public. The best you can do often is to get like the big hockey water bottles, the ones with the long necks that go through masks, and then you can hydrate yourself that way.
I tend to use a Camelback actually. know,
Yeah.
That's
fill
another
water
good
and run
one.
around there. They're good.
You will, in fact, see some furries who have very flexible masks, effectively deep-throating water bottles, and that happens. Trust that it's probably for a good reason.
And you can deep surf here too. It's always good.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, how do you maintain like clean it up, like dry cleaning? How do you clean? Keep them clean.
Also, with great difficulty. A suit like Kazuki over here, if you'll stand up.
Oh, my huge legs.
And turn around. So one of the things you'll see about these elaborate markings is that they're actually different colors of plastic fur. So there's actually very little ink on this suit. So you can just invert it, throw it in the washing machine on cold, and let it air dry, and it'll keep going like that very easily. This one happens to be about probably half airbrush paint by weight, and so generally this is something that you'll wash just in soap and water in a bathtub, wool-like dark, very gently, and that's also something that you'll notice about the suits, is that when you go around with people, some of them are prepared to just goof off in the rain or in the mud. Some of them are very careful about keeping their suits in good condition, or they might be very delicate or fragile. And so also when interacting with fursuiters, it's a very important point to see what level of interaction they're up for. Just because they choose to present as a different character doesn't mean that they're really ready to do everything that Lucille, the San Francisco Giants, is willing to do out in the field. Everybody has a different limit.
Damn insurance.
Is there any intersection between the furry community and how do you guys interact with actual animals? Are you guys like big fake fur, no fur folks, or all vegetarians or all carnivores or what?
We have a wide range there.
I think you'll be actually more likely to find the people who pick carnivorous large mammals and are very veggie averse.
You'll find those. You'll find vegans.
I know otters who don't like fish, which is kind of weird, but sure.
But to answer the question more directly, generally everybody who's with furry in some sense or another very much enjoys animals. So while the experience is different for every person, by and large you'll see the furry community be very animal friendly, be very much protecting of animal shelters around, of wild animal reserves.
Let's say I know a lot of dog owners who are furries.
For what it's worth, it would be very not appropriate and not well received if someone were to try and get, say, a dealership at a furry con and sell real fur anything.
Yeah, that's generally considered a faux pas.
Another thing too is that
Yes. Faux pas. I was wondering if anyone got it.
that most of the conventions also have a charity that they have auctions for and stuff, and out of these will be animal-connected charities in some way, whether it's animal rescue or whatever. So almost all of them will have some kind of animal-related charity that they will do fundraising for to a certain extent at the conventions. Is a measure of our love for animals.
Cool.
So.
It's usually, but not always, an animal-associated charity. But one milestone that was recently passed at Midwest Fur Fest last year, I think, was they added up the announced donations to charity across the entire history of furry conventions, and it just crossed $1 million. Wow. And so there's a lot of fundraising, a lot of giving, while we're all having some fun.
FC Big Cats panel?
There is in fact a annual wild animal panel, and so we have animal handlers, typically from local nonprofits, come over and present their animals. We had a fennec fox, and
we usually have big cats every year. I think like ocelots and things.
Right, and so that's a regular presence at Further Confusion and at many other furry cons.
And trust me, fennecs make the most distressing sounds when they're happy. Their happy sound is really distressing. So you had a question.
Yeah. So I guess it's in that most of the furry community is established through the internet, basically. What would you say are the most popular venues or methods to meet each other?
So there's Furry Mug. Way back in the day, a lot of furries were on Tiny Mud, which was the biggest mud at the time. I'm not sure a mud is a multi-user dungeon. It's basically Zork with a combat system that lots of people can connect to. It's sort of the predecessor of today's MMORPGs. Mucks, on the other hand, are much lighter code. They don't have the combat code by necessity. Furry Muck is the big one. There's several others. You might hear of Tapestries, that's the adults only, and they mean it.
I would mention FA.
There's Fur Affinity, there's the Vixen Controlled Library, VCL.
What is it? There's a huge group on IRC. It's a Furry IRC channels.
And generally, if you see a cartoon animal as someone's Twitter avatar, 90% chance it's one of us.
There's a furry gaming site that just started recently called Gaming Forever, which is very user-centric, so it's all user-posted articles. And
There's also the Furry Gaming Alliance, so that's another one.
For writers, there's Playwright, which is a news site, furry news.
Live journals still actually used quite a bit. I'm on a group, I think it's like Xbox Live Furries or something, and trade gamer tags and games and game with each other and stuff like that. Steam too. Live journals still. Yes, Steam, very big one.
One thing that you'll notice across these social communities, and this is a point of amusement for a lot of people, is that you know, to some degree this happens in gamer circles too. You might know someone only by their furry name, and so introducing someone in that context to, say, a coworker can be amusing.
Yeah. Or going to a convention and you know that you're sharing the room with someone, and all of a sudden you go, I don't know their name. Now, this has never happened to me, never.
Categorically, you'll find furries to be introverted as well. You know, choosing to participate in whatever character they choose. And so you'll occasionally also, in doing one of these room shares, come up to someone who you're not sure you know and say, "Are you Red Griffin?"
86?
Oh, okay. Hi! Yeah, I know you from Tapestries.
There's room for that.
Should pick another name.
So some other ways to help each other. Recognize that most furries, even the ones that are heteronormative and cisgender, have a lot of ally tendencies towards the LGBT community. One of the people that I know from Furry and then from City of Heroes, he's the one who got me into the Kickstart for this. And he's straight.
He is. Just very supportive.
One of the things about Furry is that, and I think I feel safe to say this, that there's a standard of acceptance. And so generally if you go to a con and you feel like someone is behaving in a way that denigrates you or any of the choices that you've made, generally that means that they are in the wrong, and the con staff will help you make sure that everyone's having a good time.
In the words of Will Wheaton, don't be a dick. That's the way that's the golden rule in furry fandom. Don't be a dick.
That's a rule in any fandom.
Well, there's some dates. The trash talking is perfectly acceptable, and not knowing when to stop the trash talking is also acceptable.
I just wanted to mention a couple other resources. So,
Sure.
There's a lot of people talk on FetLife. There's a few groups on FetLife, and also there's a monthly party called Frolic at the Stud, which is a really great way to go and sort of be in the environment, and also it's like the nicest party I think I've ever been into in my life.
Next weekend, Saturday night.
It's like so chill. There's like very little drama. It's just already super friendly. It's just great.
So this is the at every second Saturday of the month at the Stud, which is at Harrison and 9th.
It's a gay bar.
Yes.
It's a really fun gay bar, actually.
And they have a small cover, and it's generally all are welcome in of age, and come have a drink and party. There are generally, I don't know how many
We pack the place. It's usually difficult to move around.
So that monthly event is larger than a lot of small conventions.
And their drinks are super strong, so.
You know, he's here for it.
And people will get out there in full fursuits and just dance all night long. I don't know how they do it. It's crazy.
So it looks like I have time for just one more question.
One more question in back, I saw. That was just one. In back.
Yeah, so my question is, my brain just went totally blank. But
I know the feeling.
So what I was going to ask is, so you guys are talking a lot about in-person cons and how accepting the furry fandom is, but I think a lot of the problem that we have in the gaming community is how unaccepting and how caustic people are when it's just purely internet interaction. So is there a way that you think we could bring some more of that acceptance over to gaming, like just through that internet interaction? Because I think that's where we're really seeing the harshest sort of like acrimonious.
Some of the not tolerating the, for want of a better word, bullshit from people. Tolerance doesn't mean let people walk over you. Furry has, as a community, the worst thing that furries can do to someone is ostracize. So if someone's being a complete jerk and won't stop it, they'll find themselves cut out of social circles in furry.
Yeah, and so it's very much, that's just kind of a standard. As it approaches bringing it to other communities, that's a really tough one, because part of that baseline of acceptance is something that is just kind of inherent to the community. And so I think the best we can do is just, if you see something that is exclusive of people, that's really making someone feel bad, then act up yourself and, you know, kind of as a grassroots part, say, this is not the community that I want to be a part of. I want to be a part of a community that is okay with everyone no matter how they present themselves. And it'll just kind of grow from there.
So we actually don't have time for more questions. I was going to say, in closing, that reach out to your local furry. We're almost all allies. We want to be friends. So if you show us respect, we're more than willing to show you respect. We're more than willing to speak up for the other, because we're all others.
And if you have any other questions, especially about Further Confusion, we'll be upstairs at the Further Confusion table in the expo hall. So please come up and say hello.
Say hi, get photos.